welcome to the Tech4RegenAg webinar, here with Professor Christos Vasilikiotis. So thank you very much for coming. My name is David Santos. I am a project manager at Food for Sustainability, working in the management of Tech4RegenAg, which I will briefly present to you. So Tech4RegenAg is a project that is co-funded by the EIT Food, that aims essentially to establish cause-effect relationships between regenerative agriculture, soil health, animal product quality, and consumer information, namely regarding not only the nutritional density but also the sensory evaluation of such products. So our project is called Enabling Technologies for Wider Database Implementation of Regenerative Agriculture in Europe. So to give you an idea of the consortium that we have working in this project, we have 4 partners. The first one being BGI, which is a company that is located here in Portugal. It's the coordinator. It is a company that accelerates startups and is related with the development of sustainable ventures. So not only related to agriculture, but that's a big area that they're focusing right now. We also have Certifier, which is a company from Spain, a partner that is involved with the data treatment and the data repository that we will generate from the data that will be generated throughout the project, from the soil health to the animal product quality. We have Food for Sustainability, where I work at, where we are a non-for-profit association working with the implementation of sustainable agriculture systems, focusing always on soil health and using it as a core towards decision making. And last but not least, we have Yata Sezik. So this is an agri-food research institute located in Valencia, in Spain, who are working with us in everything related with animal products. So to give you an overall idea, the project appeared as an answer to the objectives that Europe has. So we want to convert 25% of agricultural land to organic farming. For this, we need to have data. We also want to mitigate the environmental impact of conventional farming, giving some sustainable practices that can be easily implemented, combining both environmental and economic sustainability. And then, of course, we want also to mitigate the use of chemicals and monocultures used in the food chain. So we will be in this project that started last year and will finish in June of next year in 2026. We will be working in 6 major areas. The first one being policy review, where we are reviewing policy frameworks and creating a set of recommendations that will be presented later down the year. We have one work package also dedicated to education and training, where we are making capacity building actions, as well as creating some tools to help farmers in their day-to-day lives, such as eco-scheme simulators. We have one work package dedicated to the implementation of agricultural practices and towards the monitorization of such practices to check whether or not they are efficient. A bit more that later. And we have data-driven verification of RegenAg benefits, where we are allocating all this data that is generated in soil health analysis, as well as consumer and animal product quality, in a repository called RegenAg X. We also have the business creation and relationship with corporates work package, where we have a startup acceleration program. We are essentially also creating some capacity actions to these startups to help them design their pilots and to test their products and advance their TLR. And also, we have, last but not least, a work package more dedicated to consumer awareness, where we are essentially establishing a link between what is regenerative agriculture and the perception that these consumers have on them. So just to give you a bit of an insight into what we are doing on the field, we have several pilot studies running at the moment. This one, where you are seeing the video, is in a farm here in Portugal, where we are essentially changing the way that one dairy goat farmer is doing the management of a pasture, which, as you might guess, is the greener one here in the picture. And you can see here that by doing some mulching, as well as supplying the soil with some micronutrients, as well as supplying it with trichoderma, we can have pasture growth that is quite different from its neighbors. And this is mostly based on a soil analysis that we do, where we characterize on a very comprehensive level the physical chemical profile of the soil, as well as the soil microbiome. So we can go and detect pathogens and to check exactly which pathogens are present, to what level, and what they are doing, and we can create a set of recommendations that act accordingly. So this farmer is working with us on that, but we have several other projects scattered a bit across. So we have some pilots in dairy farming in the Azores, for instance, and we have also some pilots in small ruminants dedicated for meat and also for cows dedicated for beef, solving their particular issues using regenerative principles and acting in a context-depending manner. So here today we are in our workshop. And how can this regenerative agriculture be monitored for effective outcome based measures? And with us today, we have Dr. Christos Vasiliotis, who is the Associate Dean for Research and Chair of the Sustainable Agriculture and Management Department at Perotis College in Greece, where he also directs the Analytical Laboratory. His research spans from agroecology and regenerative agriculture, with expertise in ecosystem design, soil health, bioeconomy, and community-based food systems. He also contributes to the Horizon Europe project Lilies for Soils and other EU initiatives that advance sustainable farming. And with that, I would like to thank Professor Christos very much for being with us today, and I will pass the word to him. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, David, and good morning and welcome to everybody for this presentation. Let me share my presentation so we can get started. So you all can see it, right? Is it showing correctly?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so yeah, so what I will like to address is how can regenerative agriculture be monitored in order to be effective for outcome-based measures? We all know about regenerative agriculture. There's a lot of projects going on, and there was an EU CAP network focus group that it was exactly addressing regenerative agriculture and soil health. We developed a mini paper, and that's what I'm going to discuss today, present this paper and discuss some of the features that we developed through this focus group. And our focus was outcomes and indicators for regenerative agriculture across Europe. You see the names of those who participated in the bottom. So the agricultural challenges, I'm not going to go into detail. We all know about them. Soils worldwide are subject to several threats: erosion, sealing, pollution, and so on. And there's, of course, urgent need for land management practices that and systems to have the capacity to stop and reverse that negative decline of agricultural soils. So regenerative agriculture is an outcomes and principles-based approach. That means that we want to actually monitor and see what's the effect. Organic agriculture has been implemented so far is a process-based. So if you follow certain guidelines and apply certain practices, then it can get certified. The goal for regenerative is to actually see also the outcomes that are produced during this approach. So it has a potential to address challenges and focuses on soil health and reversing decline of soil health, and promote implementation of practices that are adapted to a local context. So regenerative agriculture can be very local specific because every region has different needs and different challenges. So by restoring soil health aims to reverse biodiversity loss, restore well-functioning water cycles, adapt, of course, to mitigate climate change, one of the major challenges facing our planet today. And lastly, but not least, increase economic profitability. It's very important for farmers who apply regenerative agriculture to actually be profitable. So economic profitability is a very important part. Now, the basic principles, very briefly, is minimize soil disturbance, maximize living roots in the soil throughout the year, energize with diversity, increase biodiversity both above ground and below ground, and keep the soil covered throughout the season. So, as a holistic system that has a goal to enhance ecosystem health in an agricultural system, we'll focus on regenerating soil, water, biodiversity, than just sustaining. One big difference of what we'll be discussing up to now, talking about sustainable agriculture, about sustaining the current level of productivity and quality. But when you have a soil that's becoming degraded, then you need not only to sustain the current level, but regenerate it. So that's one of the goals of regenerative agriculture. To build soil organic matter and fertility through natural processes. As far as climate change mitigation, sequester carbon in the soil and vegetation. Water retention, increase nutrient cycling and ecosystem resilience through minimal soil disturbance, diverse crop rotations, and of course, one major part of regenerative agriculture, David already shown some examples of people integrating livestock and crop systems for balanced nutrient flows. So the more integrated animals and crops, the more sustainable the systems can become and more regenerative the practices. Of course, for long-term productivity, profitability, and community well-being. So it's thinking beyond the basic traditional scope of organic and sustainable. So at the farm level, regenerating soil, creating healthy system. At the local environment, reducing chemicals, supporting wildlands and wetlands, surrounding environment of the farm. And at the community level, it's also reducing chemicals, increasing local employment, and create local communities that are more robust. Now, there is one certification system. There's a number of it being developed. One of the most widely accepted today is the Regenerative Organic Certified ROC. And I want to emphasize that, and as this certification covers both soil health, animal welfare, and social fairness. But what I'm going to discuss today is primarily the first part, social health, but the other two are also very important. Okay, I don't have time to go on the other ones, but they're really important to look at social fairness in our systems and animal welfare. But we focus on soil health. So regenerative agriculture, by definition, and assess this place and context specific. So the goal of that focus group was to develop a pan-European outcome-based and place context indicator framework for soil health that can be applied in every region and focus not only on scientific measurements, but also co-development with farm managers in every location. So we want the farmers to actually become part of that indicator framework, be able to monitor themselves changes and improvements through their application of various practices. So we focused on the following soil health outcomes that support the main soil functions and the established concept of regenerative agriculture. So it's increased infiltration and water holding capacity. These are the outcomes we want to try to find out protocols and measures that we can implement in this case. Reduce erosion. We know erosion is very, very high in the Mediterranean countries. We have soil loss of 1 to 2 centimeters, even though we know that we need more than a century for a 3 millimeter soil to be formed. Increase soil biodiversity, and I'm going to show you later, soil biodiversity plays a role in multiple functions: aggregation, nutrient cycling, nutrient retention, disease suppressiveness. So it's really critical. Increase carbon sequestration, and this plays two roles. First is plays a role in climate change mitigation by storing carbon, removing it from the atmosphere, reducing greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. But also, soil organic carbon is one of the key variables that can play a role in multiple biological, physical, and chemical properties of the soil. Increased nutrient cycling, very important to increase primarily nitrogen cycling, nitrogen potential through nitrogen fixation and also cycling through minerals. And it's all based on microbial activity and diversity. And also pest and disease suppressiveness. It's very important to understand that increasing soil organic carbon, increasing soil biodiversity, we also have a really major effect on reducing pests and diseases in soil and above ground. So I want to show you this diagram of the soil, and it's important to understand soil by itself is just the minerals, silt, clay, and sand. They have no structure and they have very few properties by themselves. What creates the soil quality, what creates the soil that has good structure that we need, as we can see here, is the aggregates. So we can see here, I don't know if we can, those aggregates that are formed, they're all formed through microbial processes and plant roots and create these aggregates that are very stuck together through organic glues in a way. So the more aggregates are formed, as you can see here, they create the macropores. They're responsible for both infiltration but also percolation. When it rains, the water does not pull up or stay on the top layers. It filters down to lower soil layers. Also, it creates the micropores where water is being stored, and those molecules and aggregates, organic matter and silt and clay will also have water holding capacity. And it allows the oxygen and air to penetrate so bacteria can form and be active, and provides, of course, space for roots to grow and root aeration. So it's very important to understand that this structure has to be maintained through microbial processes and continuous presence of roots. Microbes need organic carbon for them to maintain, so it's really important to monitor that. Okay, so let me show you the table we created. So it's two tables. And what we try to do is to look at the whole soil health outcomes, what we really want to focus on, what are the indicators that we want to measure, and then we identified both scientific methods of measuring them and farmer-based or field-based measures. So if we take increased water holding capacity and infiltration, a very important soil health component, we can measure water infiltration rate. There are scientific ways through infiltrometers, and also farmers can do it very simple. I saw you, I think, a photograph. Sorry, that's soil infiltration. Farmers can do it with the small cylinders. They can put in the soil and put the water and then measure how fast it infiltrates. So it's a very simple and easy way to perform this. Soil compaction, we can measure bulk density. Farmers can do it through visual assessment of soil, or there are very simple penetrometers that can measure the depth. Soil water content can be measured easily in the farm and the laboratory. And water holding capacity, there are simple ways like a funnel method to measure how much water can be held per volume of soil. Soil cover, there's actually some apps. One of them is Canopel. They can take a photograph of the soil and give you percent canopy coverage. So a very simple way for a farmer or land manager to measure the amount of coverage, soil coverage, and different time of the year. The next one for soil structural stability or aggregate stability, there's soil slake test. And I'll show you that I think this is one of the most important tests that a farmer can do, or any demonstration. Let's see if I can. So these are the soil from two different parts of the same field. On the right, this one was tilled normally every year. On the left, has not been tilled for 2 years. And you can see the one on the left stays completely intact. On the right, as soon as the water enters, the soil aggregates are so loose that they collapse. And you can see just everything's collapsed. So that have multiple effects. When it rains, the soil will seal on top, so very little water will infiltrate, but also will cover, will block all the micropores, so less oxygen will get in. And it's a very good indicator of multiple things. One is organic matter, because this stability of the soil is part of organic matter formation and microbial activity. So it's a really simple test anybody can do to see as they progress through different practices. This was just a no tillage and tillage. The one on the left is exactly the same field tilled for 2 years, no till for 2 years. Erosion rate can be measured with visual inspection, and then also roots. We can look visual inspection of the number of roots in the pit. This is infiltrometer I mentioned. Now, biodiversity, there's a way to look at indicator plants, what grows in the field. Earthworms, it's really a very good indicator. If we find earthworms play a really good role in aerating the soil and creating also both organic matter and increasing aggregate stability with their the vermicompost they produce. Now, for microbial diversity, this is a very wide topic. We chose a few that are very easily detected and can be easily affected by soil management. So one is carbon mineralization and respiration. The respiration can show you the amount of bactivity in the soil. So this is one of the simple ones. PLFA is more technical, and then now with the molecular tools, I think it's easier to find out the functional groups in the soil. But I want to show you something very interesting that can take place in the soil. It's called the underpants. They've done it in Switzerland. The underpants experiment. They asked farmers to go and put, or people in their, to put a pair of cotton underpants in the soil, bury them for a month, and then take them out. And you can see that depending on the bacterial activity in the soil, that cellulolytic activity will degrade at different levels. So when they found out actually there's a big display of different underwear that have a different, some of them were not even touched at all, remain intact, other ones were completely degraded. So it's a simple way just to see how active it is, and that will determine any kind of inputs you put in the soil, cover crops, straw you might incorporate, how fast it will be decomposed. So soil organic matter, it's very important. In the farm, you can do it visually. There's ways to measure it as soil organic carbon. What I want to say about that what we propose, and it's very important now, a lot of papers are discussing this, and in our project, the Leaders for Soil on carbon farming, we will actually measure that, because just measuring soil organic carbon fraction by itself is not so informative, because we have two soil organic carbon fractions, very important ones. One is the mineral associated organic, and the particular organic. And then there's also dissolved organic matter. So I want to show you that the mineral associated is the most stable one, is a long-term storage, and has a very low turnout rate. So that's really important when we try to measure carbon sequestration, and for the European Union to be able to use outcome-based support for farmers to demonstrate that actually they're storing long-term carbon, not in a very labile position. Has really important role in improving soil structure, aggregation, water holding capacity. The dissolve is what's available for bacteria, and it's really important to have that component too, because that's what bacteria will use to keep through the different nutrient cycling, organic matter production, and so on. So it's very important as nutrients, and it's an indicator of health, soil health. And then the particular is a very labile fraction, but also very important. That's the source for soil biota, is a food source for microbes in the top layers of the soil, and it's a temporary nutrient supply. So you can really, that can be easily converted to nutrients for the crops. So if we just summarize those, POM is a more vulnerable carbon that's cycled very quickly, but it's very important too, and can be very easily affected by tillage or overgrazing, and has the ability to increase theoretically indefinitely. The MAOM is more protected, is what is made, or smaller molecules attached to minerals in the soil. That's why it's called mineral associated organic matter. It's very protected and has much long term. Now here I want to add, even for the POM, the particle associated organic matter, if we create very good aggregates, the aggregates, soil aggregates, can actually protect POM within those aggregates. So with really good aggregate stability, more organic matter will be protected from decomposition. And here I just want to show you this from one study. They looked at MAOM and POM, and they see when as organic matter increases in the soil, MAOM reaches a certain plateau and it doesn't increase any further. So it's, for a given soil, we'll have a very definite amount of MAOM that can be generated. Whereas POM can keep increasing as the organic carbon increases. So then the new organic matter produced will be POM associated. So that's very important to understand. They're both important fractions. And again, that's why it's all dependent on context. Different soils, different areas have a different capacity to create more stable carbon than other ones. Go back, sorry. Now, a way to measure the DOM, the dissolved organic, is this POXy method, measures the readily available carbon pool, and that's one of the measures and indicators that are really dependent on soil management. So if you improve soil quality, this will actually increase, and it's very correlated with soil health. pH, organic nitrogen available, very important, and soil microbial activity can be done with respiration tests, the underpass we saw before, and in the end, there's some pathogen. There's a bioassay by Cornell that measures a different activity of potential pathogens, but that's not easy to do in the field. So that's overall is the set of indicators that we try to come up. And again, we propose, and there are links to all these methods, so how farmers or land managers can use those methods to really apply into the field and monitor how different practices will affect soil quality. Now, what needs to be done, of course, these are very complex indicators, and it's very important to develop ones that reflect ecosystem services in every region. And the more reliable indicators we develop, they're easier to help monitor the effects of different practices in regenerative agriculture. Now, one thing I wanted to mention here, when we talk about soil health is a kind of it's a more like uh, a paradigm. It's not really well easy to define. We can define soil quality by the indicator we talked about. Soil health is a more of a general concept. It's very important to talk about it, and I think can only measure in a given area if there's soil health increasing. You cannot really give a number to soil health. There are very too many parameters, but I think overall soil health can be measured. The indicators we mentioned, they really are very sensitive to soil management practices, and regenerative agricultural practices can affect all these indicators. So having all these together can give you a really good picture. Now, what will be very important is to develop some platforms where, from all the studies that are taking place, a lot of projects, to try to bring together all the indicators and the outcomes for regenerative agriculture and try to maybe create an app that will assess and interpret soil quality. That would be really important to be able to do that, maybe for every region, to use an app that can tell you based on the indicators what the health quality is and how it's improving. And of course, it's very important to keep developing more functional microbiome assessment methods. Bacteria and fungi in the soil, we know there are thousands of different species, very hard to measure specific ones. We need to develop functional groups and find ways to look at ones for part of soil health, ones for help with disease suppression or stress adaptation, and ones that are responsible for nutrient cycling. One thing I want to mention about, there's always this question about what do we do with, for example, crop residues if there's any kind of disease incidents. And one thing that most studies will show that as you increase soil biodiversity, roots will be covered and colonized by beneficial microorganisms. So the chance of infection by a pathogen is always reduced. So many times farmers will say if they have any disease, they want to burn the cover crop because to eliminate the pathogens. But it's actually, I think it's the opposite. Increasing the biodiversity by increasing organic matter and input more carbon in the soil will actually reduce the chance of any kind of soil-borne pathogen. So I'm going to stop here and take any questions.
Thank you very much, Professor Christos. Very, very interesting presentation. Yes, we already have a question here in the chat from the audience, from Rebecca Thompson. So she says that I'm loving your practical approach to farmer-led analysis. I'd love to a link to this work if already published, please. So do you have any sort of link that you can share already, Professor? And can you share if
Yeah.
there were many challenges in gathering data consistently across these different farms and regions, and how to compare to this to any other indicator system already in place?
Well, okay, there's a link, and I think I'll try to find and put it in the chat, or otherwise I'll send to you and you can email to
Yeah,
everybody.
I can do that right
Uh,
now. Yeah, you can answer the second part.
so we tried to actually to look at different studies and indicator sets. So we try to collect the ones that in our group try to find the ones that are most easily performed, either in the laboratory or in the field, and they're more indicative of the effect of different soil management and regenerative agricultural practices. Now, I think all different protocols have slightly different approaches, but and we need to keep working on that because there's no definite answer. But I think we try to cover the ones that are most appropriate overall as a pan-European indicator set.
Right. Thank you very much, Professor. So if anybody wants to raise their hand or turn on their microphone, they can ask your questions directly to Professor Christos if you want. So until then, I have a couple questions that I'd like to ask you. So, of course, when in me in particular, I'm very much on board with regenerative agriculture, and I really do think that it can help us to a great extent. But farmers as a whole are already pretty pressured by monitoring schemes and by bureaucratic procedures in their certifications, being organic, regenerative organic, so on and so forth. So do you think there's an easy way to apply this context depending monetization at a large scale without increasing the costs related with bureaucracy, namely the time that they spend filling out papers and forms?
Are you referring to farmers doing it, or are you referring to
Farmers, yeah.
farmers doing it? Yeah. Uh, well, there's a number of app-based applications that are actually uh, smartphone-based applications that are trying to simplify. There's one actually that can measure very simply measure soil aggregate stability. It's an app. You use your smartphone. You take you dig a soil. You take in the top 10 centimeters um, soil, and you take small pieces of three um, soil aggregates. You put them on a piece of paper. You take a photograph with your phone. You use something to keep the same distance, either a tripod or um, some way to secure it to be the exact same distance. And then you take um, a plastic cup with a flat bottom, you put those soil aggregates in, add some water, and then 10 minutes later, you measure the size of the soil as it either expands, like I saw in the example, when if it's really very loose aggregates, will start forming a really large circle around it, otherwise they remain the same. And that gives an indicator. It gives you an index number, and then you can compare. You have one field you're trying one process, and then the other one is the one you've been doing all these years, and you can just measure very simply. So that's one example farmers can do um, that they can look. Another one I think is infiltration. It's really important. So the aggregate stability and infiltration are really good indicators of how the soil quality progresses. And if they, because those require all the other parameters to take place. In order to increase aggregate stability, you need both microbial biodiversity, you need to have soil organic carbon be available, both in the dissolved fraction and in the particulate organic matter. And so all these parameters are needed in order to increase aggregate stability. So I think that would be one way to monitor. And of course, I did not discuss here looking at the yields and crop health is of course very important. They can use that as a guide, but these are important ones to look at the soil and try to monitor. So I don't know if I'm answering your question,
Yeah, you did, you
but I
did. As
think
soon as you described the first app, I remember it's the Slakes app, right? So I
yes,
already
yes,
I shared it in the chat. Yeah, so you think that this citizen science approach will be a good way to monitor a large scale. That's very interesting.
yeah. I think, as you said, I mean, that is to minimize the
Hmm.
burden on farmers. But of course, the other step is if they get certified by different certification schemes, or for the EU, any of the common agricultural policy, then they will need to actually have somebody come in and perform those studies for them in order to get certified. So
Okay, thank you very much. So we have another question here in the chat by Sebastian Bittner. Sebastian, do you want to turn on your microphone and ask your question directly?
Yes, hello. Thanks for the presentation. Yeah, I had a question about the soil monitoring law that just passed yesterday in the European Parliament. And I wanted to ask, what is if you're well aware of the law, like what is your opinion about the soil indicators that they're talking about, or if this will effectively, measure and give us a good picture of the soil state in the EU? Thank
yeah, thank you. Yeah, I I read the law a while ago. I haven't seen the final um, paper that came out, the final report. Uh, remember reading it, it was in a good direction. I think it's important to start talking about it. It's probably not perfect, but it's very important to talk about soil health, and it's we put the burden on different regions and governments to actually implement those. I think for me that would be the most difficult part. how to implement it in local, in regional or on state areas, because there's always resistance and it's very difficult to apply that.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you, Sebastian, for your question. Thank you, Professor Christos. So on that note, I wanted to also ask you, um, so do you think that there is you know an overload of indicators? So you show lots of indicators on very many different levels, so in all dimensions of soil health, I'd say. Do you think there's one key indicator that could be implemented on an outcome-based incentive scheme, for example, or an indicator that you have not mentioned that basically combines the weights of all these parameters? Could you develop a bit more on that?
Yeah, that's always, the tricky question, how to simplify it. And I totally agree with you. We try to identify the indicators that are really important and easy to follow, but I understand totally that the farmer cannot sit and do each one of them. Uh, Again, for me, the ones that are very important one will be either the slack test, either doing it with measuring with an app, or even just a simple putting in a water with on the mesh and seeing how the soil reacts. That would be one really key indicator. It really shows if your soil quality improving. And as I said, that is the result of multiple parameters that will help to increase agri stability. So that would be one that if farmer wants to do one thing and keep monitoring that, that would be a great way to look at that.
Yeah, so feel free, everybody, if you want to ask more questions. Otherwise, I have plenty more that we can go on. So I wanted to also ask you, like, uh, you know, regenerative agriculture being applied at large scale in a particular farming system is something that is not easy to do, and some farming systems have been implemented for business as usual for closer, if not over a century. So I wanted to ask you two follow-up questions on this. So the first one is, do you think that there is an overall acceptability of farmers to RegenAg, or do you think it's mostly farmers of a particular farming system? And second, do you think that there is a particular farming system that is more well adapted to implement RegenAg at a large scale, and why?
Okay. So I know that in the United States, I'll start from there because they were doing a type of regenerative agriculture by implementing no-tillage for many years. And there was the main concern was soil erosion and soil health, soil quality. They're really noticing.
Prototype crash, injured another test bed, requiring
Sorry.
over a year of delays, and a couple of years later, an airframe was destroyed in an aerial
Sorry.
display for the public. Luckily, that pilot survived as well. Flight testing would not conclude until the mid-1990s, and it took even longer.
Can we ask anyone that
Sorry.
Sweden had decided none.
I'm sorry. One of the videos started playing by itself on my computer. So I was saying that in the US, because of the extreme problems with soil erosion, they started implementing no-tillage, which is one part of regenerative agriculture. Of course, they were still relying on chemicals, was not the ideal, but they saw a big effect of no-tillage. The other one that I've noticed.
The Gripen was the way of the
Sorry.
future. All its flight issues seemed as if they could be worked out. And in the time it took to get the aircraft into production, Saab had already been able to put a successor variant, the C and D versions, to replace the A and B versions that Sweden started with. Known as the Turbo Gripen, the C and D integrated in-flight refueling capabilities, onboard oxygen regeneration, modern avionics, and much more. The Gripen had a bit.
I'm sorry. For some reason,
No problem.
this video keeps playing. Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, please
So I
proceed.
was saying the second part that's very important is farmers who do great beef and dairy production. They're the ones who actually had the most success in applying regenerative agriculture. And in the US, there's a number of really successful farmers, animal farmers that they had moved to regenerative, and there's primarily using primarily requiring to do rotational grazing, and they have really high success. They managed to convert soils that are very degraded, grasslands and pastures, they're very degraded, by managing their animals in a certain way. So they only graze for a certain time period, then they move out and they allow to be grow the crops to continue growing, photosynthesizing, storing carbon in the soil, and they can manage really to maintain both water throughout the year. They stop doing any fertilizers, and these are really very good examples. And there's a number of different practices they can use, but I think those are ones who are kind of the ultimate regenerative agriculture. It's not easy to apply everywhere. I know in Europe there are very few examples, at least in Greece, we don't have any examples of integrated crop management with animals. We have some partial examples of animals grazing in orchards, in olive groves. This is really good too. But I think the regenerative or rotational grazing, or it's one of the best examples. And what we can do, we can learn from that to see what benefits they get and how important it is, and see if we can maybe use some of those practices into other farming systems.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. Yeah, I bet they had to adapt to the Dust Bowl for sure. So we have another question here in the chat by Claudia Costa. Claudia, would you like to turn on your mic and ask your question directly? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, David. Professor Christos, thank you so much for your brilliant presentation. It's really, really interesting and focusing regenerative, the indicators from regenerative agriculture to a practical point of view for farmers. It's quite valuable also, that approach. Well, my question is, really would like to hear your thoughts on whether we are just focusing too much on the benefits of regenerative agriculture around carbon and carbon potential and carbon sequestration. We are well aware that there are plenty of other outcomes and benefits from regenerative agriculture, from productivity, or at least in terms of the baseline for farmers, in terms of the input costs that they can save, ecosystem service, water management quality, biodiversity protection. There are also some studies that link this practice to increase nutrient density of food. So what is your view in terms of, focusing, kind of our marketing message around carbon? Should we try to expand, or do you think this is actually the best way forward?
Oh, great. No, thanks. This is a great question, and I totally agree that focusing on carbon is not focused that the carbon is the only thing that's important. It's one of the bases that actually develops all the other ones. So we need to be aware of all the other ones you mentioned, and they're very important indicators and outcomes from regenerative agriculture. But the important thing about carbon is, in a way, the simplest component we can check, as I said, has multiple benefits and affects all the other parameters you mentioned. And I'm saying that because carbon actually plays two roles. We have this with David, we're partners in this new Horizon project and for sustainability with you guys on carbon farming. And it's not that carbon is the only important part, but carbon can have both help with sequestration, so it makes it very simple for society to understand that we need to help farmers store more carbon. So it makes a very simple message to store more carbon, because we need to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So that makes it a way to not market it, but to help people understand why it's important. But at the same time, if it was only for the CO2 sequestration, I would say yes, we can do it, but it's not, let's look at all the other ones. To me, the carbon in the soil is one that is so important for everything else. Carbon is the food source for all microbes. So soil biodiversity, every microbe, they can play a role in nutrient cycling. You got different nitrogen fixing bacteria that are not associated with the roots of legumes. Those require carbon source in the soil. So the carbon will help those to actually fix more nitrogen in addition to what legumes will do. And as we're finding out that these bacteria can actually have a pretty significant effect in fixing more nitrogen without being associated with roots of legumes. And we kind of negate the whole question about GMOs of trying to make corn with they can symbiotic relationship with legumes, which I think doesn't make any sense to me. So nutrient cycling can be improved by carbon, addition of organic matter, the creation of organic matter, the degradation of any inputs. It continues as the roots exudates in the soil and roots are being sloughed off. This needs to be turned over to nutrients. They need carbon for that. So carbon is actually the source for energy and food and biomass structure for all the microbes, all the organisms in the soil and the plants. So I think by not focusing on carbon alone, but trying to make sure that carbon is increasing, organic matter is increasing, and then we can start focusing all the other ones. But the good thing is that many regenerative agricultural practices will actually very easily reduce carbon in the soil. So by monitoring carbon, we can see if we're actually destroying everything else. So it's a simple indicator that has multiple benefits, but it's not the only one. I totally agree with you. Carbon is one of the parameters in the soil, but we need all the other ones: productivity, pest suppression, health of food, nutrient density of food. All these are really critical, but they all start from the soil. They all start from carbon feeding those roots, feeding the bacteria to feed the plant and so on. So that's my kind of way. And so I think it's a good way to use carbon as an indicator to help educate both farmers and consumers about regenerative agriculture.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Christos. So we also have another question by Rebecca. So Rebecca, would you like to give a voice also to your comment or to your question? Otherwise, I have a last question I can ask Professor Christos as well.
Thank you, David. It's just a personal opinion. I'd love to see a citizen science grant application, focusing on incentivizing farmers to use the apps that you're talking about. Is there something that's already been done that I've missed? Or, for example, if EIT Food had a new window for the impact funding framework, is that something that you might consider doing? Because if it's a matter of collecting that data at scale and incentivizing the farmers is the bit that's missing, what are your thoughts?
Okay, thank you for the question. Actually, there's a number. One is a EU project called EcoSoil. It's more about consumers, helping consumers to monitor soil health, and it's a citizen science for soil health. In terms of farmers, I think a number of projects like the ones we're running, Leaders for Soils, we will train the farmers to monitor their soil quality themselves and help them with those tools. Our focus is not developing those tools that are for farmers, but we're going to help them use them to assist in determining the changes. And by doing our scientific analysis, they can see how much those two are related. So, but yeah, that would be nice to have more of those. A call developing. I don't know if there's one already in practice. I know Benchmarks is another project that developed a set of protocols that can be used by farmers. And I feel a lot of times we have a lot of different projects running in parallel, and it's good to be able to kind of coagulate those and get something that can be able to promote the farmers throughout Europe. So that'd be a good thing to make it more available. I think one way that is happening already, and what your question is, can really have major effect is through the living labs. You probably know that the soil mission is developing 100 living labs throughout Europe on soil. So these would be actually the best way to best approach to what you're asking. Through these living labs, they can actually use those um, simple indicators and help farmers within every living lab to apply them. And that would be even more important because that would be very location specific. So if you have the farmers in one region and through farmer to farmer interaction, they can really spread that information and have them use those tools.
Thank you very much, Professor Christos. We are a minute over time, and thank you all to everybody who sticked around with us until now. But I can't help myself but ask you one last question, Professor Christos.
Sure.
So, ever since you finished this work for the UCAP network, have you received any feedback from any policymaker, especially now that we are negotiating the next round of CAP? Do you think that they will incorporate some of the work that you've done into the policy and whatever else they've told you about it?
Yeah, no, that's something that I'm totally with you. I wish there was some kind of a connection. I feel a lot of times these are done, a lot of these focus groups are done, and then, somebody might read them, but they were never called to submit any input or anything. Even though it was developed by the EU, a lot of times I think they have so many players that they try to approach. And yeah, that would be a great thing. And I think we should be part of the process. If you pay and you develop this whole project, because we worked for a year on this, it'd be nice to have them call us back and give our input at some point. But no, it did not happen at this point.
Okay. So thank you very much, Professor Christos. Thank you very much, everybody, for your questions. It was a pleasure having you. Please stay tuned to our social media for Tech4RegenAg. We will have more webinars coming your way and other activities, some of the results of our work as well. So thank you all, everybody. Have a great day and have a great weekend as well.
Thank you all. And David, I'll send you the link to the paper
Hmm.
and you can email everybody because I couldn't find the link right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank
Thank
you
you.
all. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.